Good morning. I'm Dr. Bree Cook, Vice President of Academic Affairs, and I have the distinct honor of being able to introduce our commencement speaker. Dr. Antonia Darder is a distinguished international Freirean scholar. She holds the Leavey Presidential Endowed Chair of Ethics and Moral Leadership at Loyola Marymount University, is a distinguished visiting professor of education at the University of Johannesburg, and a professor emerita of education, policy, organization, and leadership at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Dr. Darder's work includes building on the experience of cultural researchers and bicultural education pioneers, expanding on and sharing core concepts, and demonstrating the challenges in our environment through key metrics. As an activist, she participates in a variety of grassroots efforts tied to educational rights, workers' rights, bilingual education, women's issues, environmental justice, and immigrant rights. More recently, her work has sought to articulate a critical theory of leadership for social justice and community engagement, as well as to theorize a pedagogy of beauty in the pursuit of a liberatory practice of education. She is the author of numerous books and articles in the field, including Culture and Power in the Classroom, Reinventing Paulo Freire, A Pedagogy of Love, and A Dissent Voice, Essays on Culture, Pedagogy, and Power. Dr. Darder began her educational journey at Pasadena City College, where she earned her degree in nursing. She later attended California State University, Los Angeles for her bachelor's in rehabilitation counseling, and received her Master's of Arts in Human Development with a specialization in Marriage, Family, and Child Counseling at Pacific Oaks College. She earned her PhD in Education from Claremont Graduate University. She is a public intellectual, educator, writer, activist, and artist. Please join me in welcoming our 2019 commencement speaker, Dr. Antonia Darder.
Good morning. Thank you to President Jack Bedunton, the board of Pacific Oaks College. I want to say a special thank you to Carrie Siglin for getting me through here. Bree, thank you for that wonderful, wonderful presentation. And to the class of 2019 and the families who are here to celebrate with you. This is an incredible morning. This is a beautiful morning, and I'm happy to join you. I want to begin on a personal note. Fannie Lou Hamer, a women's rights activist, community organizer, and a leader in the civil rights movement, besieged us never to forget where we came from and always praise the bridges that carried us over. With this in mind, I express my deep appreciation to Pacific Oaks College for having been an important bridge that carried me in my life. It was here at Pacific Oaks that I was introduced to the work of my late mentor and friend, Paulo Freire. My professors, Carol Brunson Day, who was known then as Phillips, Louise Derman Sparks, and Barbara Richardson enveloped me with love and nurtured my intellectual strength. They encouraged my learning of theories, but they also engaged my lived history as an impoverished Puerto Rican single mother struggling to work, to get an education, to take care of my children. They truly believed in me when I did not believe in myself. A few years later, I thought I was I'm sorry. It's been a long journey, truly has. A few years later, I returned to Pacific Oaks and this became my academic home. For 5 years, I served as a faculty member working with students to decipher the dynamics of social political oppression. It was here that I built the theory of critical biculturalism and developed a grounded understanding of what it means to teach as an act of love. So my being back with you this morning is truly a homecoming. However, never would I have believed that almost 40 years later, I would still be talking about the oppressive social and material struggles and structures that exist here in this society and around the world that impact the lives and education of our children in this country. As I thought about what I might say to you, I grappled with this task in that as much as I want to be inspiring and uplifting and congratulatory in my remarks, I had just learned the heartbreaking news that another unaccompanied immigrant boy died in government custody this week. We are still coping with the heavy racial profiling of young, working-class men of color on urban streets. Black youth never know if they're going to be targeted by the police. Incarceration rates, particularly for men and women of color, are appalling. In schools, although there has been improvement, math and reading scores are not significantly higher than they were 30 years ago. Neoliberal educational reforms and the privatization of education have made these problems, in some cases, even more difficult to tackle. In the US, as in other countries, we are also witnessing an authoritarian turn in the political climate, where post-truth notions abound. In light of these truths, we are in need of a vision to guide us towards greater social, political, and economic justice. Although you are entering an exciting and new chapter of your life, it is also a very challenging moment where social inequities persist and economic apartheid reigns globally. Everywhere I go around the world, I see the same situation in relationship to poverty. This leads us to question, how can we sustain our commitment to social justice in the midst of post-truth era that has overwhelmingly turned all sense of reason and communal responsibility on its head? Here I'm reminded of the words of our exiled sister and activist, Assata Shakur, who rightly noted, nobody in the world, nobody in history has ever gotten their freedom by appealing to the moral sense of the people who were oppressing them. Assata's words caution us to be clear about the consequences of our purpose and intention in the world, as well as the need to be anchored to a view of truth that will permit us to navigate the waters of this tumultuous time, a moment powerfully affecting us all, no matter where you're situated in society. In the morass of these times, we must recognize that truths are not simply a matter of individual opinion or the rights of some willful, wealthy individual. Our truths must instead be grounded to collective lived experiences and a historical understanding of our human needs. This signals us towards just and dynamic truths that are not separated from nature nor communal existence, but instead are interconnected with the actual conditions and consequences that common people must grapple with in an unjust and unequal world. Our truths must also be understood within the context of competing interests and the gross inequalities that persist. However, it is precisely because truths are, in fact, contested, given the inclinations of human beings to lose sight of our interdependent nature, or to brashly move into self-serving ways that collapse and corrupt emancipatory possibilities, that we need emancipatory principles for a way of life that can assist us to interrogate competing ideas, always with an eye on the social and material consequences of their enactment in the world. This compels us to ask, who benefits and who loses? So we can make choices that go beyond solely material gain or egocentric preoccupations that can blind us to the suffering of others. It is essential then that we come to work in schools and communities today with an ethical consciousness of kinship, that we are familia, we are kinship. And this must be rooted in deep criticality and the courage to question structures and practices that result in human suffering. This entails our willingness to bring the power of our social agency, our political conviction and integrity of commitment to all our relationships, and by so doing remain steady during contentious historical moments of chaos and contradiction and transition, because I feel we are now in a moment of incredible political transition. We are currently witnessing variety of examples, though, of brave and daring people who refuse to allow it to be business as usual. Teachers are organizing all over the country with communities, taking their educational concerns to the streets, inspiring folks, businesses to put out signs that declare, "We stand with teachers." And students who are protesting the adverse effects of climate change and what this will mean to their uncertain future. Immigrant communities who are coming together to unite against the inhumanity and brutality of national immigration policies and practices. In the political arena, we're also witnessing the great influence of the feminine being regenerated as women such as Alejandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and others stand together to oppose the destructive values and codes of patriarchy, racism, economic exploitation in new and exciting ways. These are women who are invoking voices of liberation, ethical voices for change grounded upon what Bell Hooks called the authority of our lived experience. That is, decolonizing voices anchored upon the actual social and material conditions of our daily lives. What is apparently distinctive about these women's voices is that they are generated from an ethical and material understanding for participatory democracy and collective action as a revolutionary force for transformation. To stand up for justice and cultural democracy requires abiding principles that firmly rooted in ethics and ethics of democratic life and human liberation. This speaks to what Enrique Dussel, the Latin American philosopher, calls an ethics of liberation, grounded in pedagogical and political principles of engagement aimed in particular towards transforming those values, beliefs, attitudes, perceptions, and structures that foreclose our freedom to be and betray our revolutionary dreams. This encompasses an ethics of practice that begins with the needs of the most vulnerable. For if the needs of the most oppressed are attended, all else will fall into place. This humanizing value embraces the preciousness of all life and embodies a realization that only love can inspire us and mobilize us to relinquish our egocentric or narcissistic tendencies and live a genuine commitment to liberation. And ethics of liberation also encompasses a sense of human kinship. I'm going to go back to that sense of kinship that entails an understanding that we exist as fully interdependent human beings. As such, we cannot ameliorate conditions of poverty, of racism, of patriarchy, of heterosexism, or religious chauvinism without embodying humanizing principles. In the Mayan tradition, for example, the ethics of Inlaque Xalaquin, you are my other me, or I am another you, serves to temper and sustain healing forms of communal relationships grounded upon individual and collective responsibility for one another. Because if you are my other me, then I'm going to come to the table with incredible respect for you. I'm going to care about what you have to say. I'm going to listen to you because I'm going to want that from you. Through enacting a consciousness of our shared kinship, we are discouraged from competition, individualism, envy, pettiness, and greed by cultivating a path of tenderness. Senju Etheline Manuel, a Black Buddhist priest, in her book, The Way of Tenderness, writes, oppression is a distortion of our true nature. It disconnects us from earth and from each other. Awakening from the distortion of oppression begins with tenderness. We recognize our own wounded tenderness, which develops into the tenderness that comes with heartfelt and authentic liberation. This understanding of authentic liberation encompasses both a personal and individual commitment to extend ourselves beyond the limits of a societal system that is predominantly determined by racialized capital and scientific edifications utilized by the few to rationalize and normalize the suffering of the many. Instead, we are challenged to daringly embrace a political consciousness of love, vulnerability, and tenderness as a collective emancipatory force for global change, commencing from the inside out. Here it is also the humble realization that we cannot genuinely embody nor teach that which we are yet to learn. And the best we teach is that which we know in our own lives. We have to be our words. It's not just about the words alone. We have to have the courage to live those words. This way of tenderness, rooted in heartfelt and authentic liberation, also defies close-minded and destructive manner in which we can wittingly or unwittingly demonize one another within the context of personal and political struggles. For example, debilitating ideologies of racism are perpetuated through the process of personal and institutional shaming of people of color as being intellectually inferior or socially deficient, both culturally and genetically. And this comes out in a whole lot of different ways, often not by the way what people think consciously, but the behaviors and things they say unconsciously. This dehumanizing dynamic, however, is also present when we employ shaming as a battle strategy against men and women who we consider to be sexist or racist or homophobic. So although we are often tempted to justify this strategy, shame is actually a profound wounding experience that deeply arrests our human development by shutting down fields of engagement and thus the possibilities for social transformation. Ultimately, shame as a political strategy within our communities and across communities weakens the collective power of our multidimensional humanity and obstructs the paths to truly knowing one another and nurturing connection in the midst of difference. Here, I'm reminded of Malcolm X's words to the Mississippi youth in 1964 when he said, "Ignorance of each other is what has made unity impossible in the past. We need more light upon each other. Light creates understanding. Understanding creates love. Love creates patience. And patience is what creates unity." To embody light, love, patience, and unity means to courageously challenge and denounce policies and practices and relationships that disaffiliate us, condemning our children and our communities to perceptions and practices of violence and hatred. This vision of social justice also calls us back to our bodies. So much of oppression is to take us out of our bodies. We need our bodies. We cannot change the world if we are abstracted from our bodies. This colonization of the flesh has left many of us numb and alienated, fragmented, defenseless to the mercy of capital. In response, rather than exercising a language of economic efficiency and neoliberal accountability within institutions, we need an ethical, democratic language of political participation to safeguard the dignity and integrity of our human differences intrinsic to this deeply pluralistic nation. An ethics founded upon love as an imperative for just collective existence invites us all to come back, to be part of a decolonizing culture that fosters human connection, intimacy, trust, and honesty. The ethics of love also engenders a brave willingness to relinquish hardened or fixed perceptions of the other so that together we can work to recontextualize. We have to reframe what it means to be free, what justice is about, and what equality in the world truly means as well. Sherry Shapiro says, with love we affirm and are affirmed in the social political struggle against death, from hunger, from disease, from exploitation, war, destruction of the earth, and against hopelessness. There's a great and growing need for our capacity to become body full with love. Also important, I just have to take a breath there, body full with love. You got to feel it, right? It's not up here, right? We got to feel it right here. Also important then is the recognition that only within collective struggles for our humanity can political consciousness and social movement intermingle effectively. Through creative and collective actions with our students, with colleagues, with communities, we can work not only to raise social consciousness, but also for reinventing in concrete ways the social structures, institutional relationships, and material conditions that shape our lives and the lives of children everywhere. At the heart of this message is a call to action. You got that right? This is a call to action. For at a time when our freedoms are being eroded, civil liberties undermined, democracy threatened, and capitalism imploding, great moral courage is required to voice our dissent against dehumanizing policies and practices that betray the well-being of our children and our communities. What we need is a solid commitment to decolonizing our minds and our bodies from the dynamics of injustice by embracing passionately our sensuality, our thinkingness, that we're thinking beings, knowing beings, we're feeling beings, and we're healing subjects of history. The late activist, author, and feminist Grace Lee Boggs wrote, "We are at one of the great turning points in human history when the survival of our planet and the restoration of our humanity require a great sea of change. Those awakened to the indefensible conditions of this historical turning point need to labor together. We must work together within our schools and our communities to nourish the empowerment, the social agency, and self-determination of people everywhere, particularly those who are still contending with the trauma of historical and contemporary violence." Underlying this call is an unwavering appreciation for the personal and political power we possess for remaking our histories through embodying personal responsibility, political commitment, and a collective consciousness fueled by a profound love for humanity and the world. With all this in mind, my great hope this morning is that as you move forward, graduates, that you will embody and enact the humanizing values and sensibilities inherent in your Pacific Oaks education, an education that I pray has prepared you mightily to be a healing presence in the world. May you persist in cultivating compassion, generosity, openness, vulnerability, and tenderness in your everyday lives. May you believe in the great power of committed human beings to do that which so many think impossible, to create a culturally democratic and economically just world. So walk with courage, with self-respect, with dignity, dear graduates. No matter what obstacles come in your life, because there's going to be a hell of a lot of obstacles, I can tell you right now. And most of all, cherish the magnificent essence of our humanity, even when we can't see the light. Congratulations, class of 2019. What a great privilege and joy to be here with you. Thank you.